So a couple weeks ago, I made a video called Franchise is Dead, and a lot of you guys seem to kind of agree with everything that I did say as I accidentally hit my mic. But if you did miss that video, I'll leave it up here. There's going to be a link to it. Go and check it out. It's a short little quick video that kind of gets to the main point of how not just MLB, but a lot of sports games have put franchise kind of on the back burner back here, where it's just kind of almost like an afterthought. You know, obviously the online modes are the big money makers, and that's kind of what the whole focus on, you know, the new installment of each game is. How can we make the online modes better? But I know a majority of people are still playing offline modes, and today I want to talk about my MLB the Show 21 franchise wish list. So we're going to be talking about things that are currently in the game mode, how they could improve them to make them better, but also some new features that could be added to really make this game mode so much better and really enjoyable. So this is only about franchise. I hope you guys do enjoy it. If you do, hit that thumbs up down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and enjoyed the content. And of course, get in the comment section. Let me know what features could be added. What is kind of like that one thing that you really wish that they could fix to make the game mode better. And if I missed out on anything, let me know down below. Of course, follow my Twitter. That link is in the description below. You know, shoot me a tweet with any, you know, kind of feedback that you guys have that you would like to tell me, or, you know, just follow it so you can kind of keep up to date when I'm going to upload and every other thing that's kind of going on behind the scenes for this channel. And that's really about it, guys. Let's just hop into it. All right, so what I'm gonna do to kind of make this so that we kind of have it like flow rather just kind of being jumping all over the place is I'm just gonna go through the menus of franchise mode, and then that way we can kind of stay on track and we can kind of talk about different talking points, and we can kind of keep it in somewhat of an order, and I can kind of stay on task rather than going off on a tangent randomly. So as you guys can see, I have everything selected on manual. We're gonna hop into a regular season, just a normal franchise, and we basically, let's just start with the roster. And I feel like this is something I've been preaching about for a couple years now, and I know a lot of people in the comment section, a lot of people have tweeted me about it. I know a lot of people in franchise have already mentioned this multiple times. Even though everything is selected on manual, you can see everything is manual here, the CPU will still get involved with the way that you handle your roster, and the CPU will call people up, send people down, they'll change your lineups, your pitching rotation, they'll randomly sign players from time to time. Like, the CPU gets involved in a roster or with your roster way too much, especially when it shouldn't be, because everything is set to manual. I know people have told me with spring training going to regular season that the CPU will put players on waivers, they'll call people up, they'll send people down. And even though you have your 26-man roster set for the regular season, once you click advance to regular season, the CPU changes the team. And I feel like you guys have seen that in my rebuilds, where you'll see a random player put on waivers that I didn't want, or I'll have a player sent down or a player called up, and it just becomes a mess because the CPU's getting involved when they shouldn't be, because I have everything set to manual. That is one thing that is just, it shouldn't happen. That is just a basic thing in franchise mode, where if I have it set to manual, I want to manually control it. I don't want the CPU involved in any way, shape, or form. So CPU, I just don't want it to change my team when I have it set to manual. That's just the basic thing that I feel like should just work in franchise. The most recent time where this kind of became evident to me was in the worst team rebuild that I did a couple days ago, where I had this guy, Lonnie Stemley, who looked like a really good hitter. And as you can see, he is a lefty thrower, but his stats were pretty good. And he also had the secondary position of catcher, and he was better than one of the catchers that I already had in the squad. So I thought, you know what? Let's put him in the team as my catcher. And then we simulate the season, we go through the whole year, and this happens. You can see he played 162 games, but only had 2 at-bats. So every single game he was substituted out, which I don't understand that. I didn't do that. I didn't, you know, have the CPU change my lineup. Like, this was a guy who played every single game, but yet was taken out. So this is just like a small thing. Obviously, like, maybe a lefty catcher isn't a realistic option, but he has the secondary position. There's no reason why he should be taken out. I get it if he wouldn't play maybe like 20-30 games a season because of fatigue and things like that, or maybe he was in a slump. The CPU felt like maybe we should switch up the player, but he played every single game. It's just he was taken out for no reason. Like, this is a catcher that should have had at bats, and shouldn't have been involved. It's just weird. I just felt like the CPU shouldn't have gotten involved there. And if I put him in the lineup, he should be in the lineup. So that's like kind of a picky one, but like I feel like that was kind of one that I had really evident and really obvious right at the, just one that I remembered right away, where the CPU kind of just changed the lineup right away, even though he should have been part of the everyday lineup and played in the game rather than be taken out. So there's that. So this was something I thought about while I was editing that I realized that I didn't even talk about, but it has something to do with AI management. So this is kind of like after I've already recorded the video. You can see like the green screen's not set up. It's actually back there in the corner. But what I thought about was AI management, not just of your team, but of the CPU teams. I've noticed so many times that the AI trades away top prospects. I've seen the Yankees trade away Jason Dominguez. I've seen Bo Bichette get traded. I've seen like Christian Pache, Drew Waters. I've always seen like top prospects get traded. I've seen the CPU just go out and sign way too many of the same position, or they just go out and sign the best player available, even if it's not necessarily a need for that team. And I just see that the way that the AI manages the like CPU controlled teams is so poor that, again, it just ruins the way franchise is. You know, like I've seen teams with 4 or 5 first basemen, or they'll have way too many starting pitchers, or they'll spend too much money on a player that they just don't need, and then they go out and they trade away their top prospects, where it's just like, what is going on with this, just the way the CPU handles everything. So that was another thing that I wanted to bring up quickly, because I feel like that is something that really needs to be tweaked or reformatted or something, because the way the CPU handles their teams is so bad. The next thing I want to talk about is like GM. We'll talk about GM goals. So GM goals, like, it's a pretty basic screen, right? You get your contract status, you have 1 of 3 years, you have your job security, your rating, your goals, you know, recent history, you can see, you know, your records and all that thing. The team performance are kind of like little stat checkers that you can see that how many times you've done it and things like that. But I feel like this section could be kind of cool, where you could almost make franchise like a GM mode, where this is kind of like your GM hub, where you can kind of earn skill points, kind of like they do in 2K, where you can, you know, kind of grow your GM, and you can like have different skill points to kind of help with trades. Like you could move a skill point up to get better trades with other teams, or you can sign players more easily with a skill point that you advance. So something like this that just have like a skill tree where you can improve your GM to kind of help you out with, you know, coach talks, player talks, trades, free agency, scouting players, whatever it is. There's just different skill points that you can evolve your GM so that you can make yourself better and make the franchise a little bit easier for you, or you just kind of help you out with your franchise along the way. Obviously, another cool thing, kind of throwing it back to MVP Baseball 2005, where you used to be able to set concession prices, ticket prices, jersey prices, things like that. It'd be cool to be able to have something like that as well. I know they do have it in 2K, and that's where I'm kind of showing you this picture. But something like that would be really cool to kind of have in like a GM hub, a GM section of MLB the Show, where, you know, you kind of have like control of how the teams run, prices, which would help you bring in new revenue. Obviously, if you set the prices too high, people won't come to the games. They won't buy, you know, concessions or merch or anything like that. So you're not making as much money, which would hurt you in the off season. But it kind of just adds more in-depth, more of a way to bring you into franchise, because you have more control of the team as a GM. So obviously with MLB, they had the, you know, your contract status, your job security, and the 2 goals. You have a contract goal and a yearly goal. But what if they did something like FIFA, where you have like yearly objectives, where things you kind of have to meet? So you have like yearly objectives, and then kind of like long-term objectives that you have to meet. And if you don't meet those objectives, your rating and your job security drops. And if your job security drops to a certain point, you can get fired. So rather than you have the 3 years and you stick out those 3 years in your contract, maybe within a season you don't meet those objectives and you get fired, and then you have to start searching for another job. So maybe you have to wait a couple weeks before a team comes and offers you a job. But I don't think I've ever seen anybody get fired in franchise mode in MLB the Show. So having those objectives to kind of push you to not just tank and stock up on high potential players so that you're always last in the league, but yet you have this really crazy farm system. So you have these objectives that force you to become a better team, or maybe you have to sign a couple veterans on your squad, or just some things like that where it's like win the division, or, you know, sign a veteran player, or try to get 3 high potential players, things like that, where it just kind of forces you to have more of a challenge, some things that like kind of push you to try a little bit harder in franchise, so that you don't just go, well, I have 3 years to try to win a World Series. By year 3, I'll just, you know, make all these crazy trades and turn this team into a super team. No, you have to actually try to win every single season, or try to improve every single season so you don't get fired. And say, you know, you have those 3 years, and say year 2, you're like, you know what, I've done really well. I feel like I want to go to a new team, maybe take on a new project. What if you were able to kind of look through a potential job opening section to see what other teams were available to try to apply to their team, you know, try to go to that squad? Obviously, FIFA has this where, you know, at the end of the season or in the middle of the year, you can try to take over a new team. What if that was another option? Or say you get fired, you know, at the end of the year, and you're looking for a new job after season 1. Well, now you have this opportunity to do that because there's these new potential job openings that are there that you can apply for. So just kind of add more in depth to this GM section where you have some objectives, you kind of have a way to improve your GM, or just different things to make this a little bit more in depth and just really improve this whole franchise mode. We're gonna hop over to the budget section, and this is something that it's a super easy fix. So as you can see, like right above me, it says cash flow per week. But yet every time I try to look at salary or handle contracts, everything's for the year. So now I gotta do my arithmetic. I gotta get my TI-89 calculator out, start doing math and multiplication and addition, and trying to figure out my weekly to my yearly salary and all these different things. Why not just make it a yearly salary to make it just a lot easier, so that we don't have to do, you know, math that most of us haven't done since 5th grade. So why not just make it so this says this is what you have left in the bank for the year, rather than a weekly budget. It's a super simple fix. You know, I don't mind this screen. I feel like this is an okay screen. I feel like it could be a little bit easier to read and figure out. But, you know, you have your player salaries at the top where it's like 2020, 2021, yada yada yada. But like, I don't have a like an area where it says, okay, well, in 2020 you have this much left, or in 2021 you'll have this much left to work with. It's just kind of like, I have this much per week. Well, now I got to do math, and I feel like it could just be a little bit easier for the user to figure out. And it's just, I think that's a pretty simple fix to have. The morale system, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. You know, if a player has good morale, it's going to boost their overall. If a player has bad morale, it's going to hurt them. It's a pretty self-explanatory system. You know, you can see there's like ecstatic, happy, satisfied, unhappy, angry. Like, pretty easy. Like, I don't mind this whole morale system. I don't really know how much it actually impacts a player, and, you know, I would kind of like to know just kind of a breakdown on like how it, if it really does impact a player, because like, I know like players get boosts, or players, you know, get negative effects based on the morale, but does it really affect them? So that'd be something I'm a little bit interested in. But like this is pretty fine. Like, I don't mind this. You know, it'd be kind of cool if you could like talk to a player about their team role or their contract, or like, you know, maybe they're unhappy with the coaching, or if you know, your team's not a contender, but if you could have like a meeting with them and be like, hey, give us a season, we'll improve the team, or hey, you know, we'll give you more playing time so that you can improve their morale a little bit, like kind of like a player meeting. I think that'd be kind of a cool thing to help with morale situations. But for right now, I'm okay with morale. But speaking of like the boosts for like overall, or the negative effects, let's talk about training here, because I don't really know how much training actually does anything. Like, does it even do anything? Is it more of just a placebo effect for us to be like, oh yeah, we're training them, maybe it'll actually help them? So I know there's, in FIFA, they have a training system that helps players, and let's talk about that. So FIFA has it where they have development plans, where you set the development plan. You can see they have like balanced, or they have a bunch of different other types where you can see the areas where it actually does improve the player. So depending on what you would pick, it'll see like a little positive arrow going up to show that that's the area that it focuses on. So say we want to improve Javi Baez, make him more of a contact hitter rather than a free swinger. So that way, you're not improving power, but you're improving your vision, discipline, contact, things like that. I feel like that'd be kind of a cool aspect, and you actually see what it's improving. And then, you'll have an ETA, which is in the top corner of how long that development plan takes to actually kick in, where it'll be completed. So then obviously, later in a career, maybe you want to make a player a power hitter, you can change that development plan as well. But I think that would be a really cool thing rather than just some random training that usually ends up getting changed by the CPU anyways. So this way you can actually select a development plan and have it stick. So speaking of development plans, say you have a player that you want to change their position. Well, that's also a possibility too. Again, you have an ETA of how long that'll take, and you can keep the player in their primary position, but of course they'll have like a secondary position once that ETA finishes, right? That time finishes where their development plan actually reaches that position. So that'd be a really cool option to have. Say I want to make Javi Baez an outfielder. Well then, I can select that development plan to make him an outfielder, and it'll take like 20 weeks for it to happen. And by the end of the 20 weeks, then he has that outfield position as a secondary. So another cool option is, with FIFA, you can play that player out of position into that position that you're trying to change them into. So say I want to make Javi Baez a center fielder. Well, I can play him in center field, and it'll speed up that process as long as he performs well in center field. He would take an overall hit, but you can at least try to speed up the process of them trying to change positions. And again, it's just something that would add a little bit more in depth, more of just a cool thing for franchise that would just be fun to have into it. So of course, training and players development and players regression is another thing that's been a huge problem with MLB the Show. So dynamic potential is basically, if a player does well, their potential and their overall goes up. So as long as they keep that form, they're going to continue to go up and up and up. Obviously, once they hit 35, 36, 37, they're kind of capped. They can't really improve more, but they'll at least hold their rating as long as they do well, right? And then they'll slowly start to trickle off the older that they get. But it's also on the reverse, where if a player, isn't doing well, their potential will slowly start to decrease. And at the same time, their overall just won't grow. They'll kind of stall out, even though they have a good potential, eventually they'll hit a plateau where they just can't get any better because they just hit that bad run of form, and they're consistently in a bad run of form. They're just not improving. So it's a dynamic potential. It's one of those things where it's kind of like a live series card in Diamond Dynasty. If they do well, they're going to go up. And if they do poorly, they're going to go down. It's just a dynamic system, right? So that would be something that would just make a lot more sense in franchise, because I feel like the way players progress and regress is so random. I've seen players who are 28, 29, but because they've been in the league for 10 years, they fall off. Or if a player, sometimes will randomly have a crazy spike at the age of 33, 34, where they hit 40 home runs and they still end up dropping 10 overall, even though they just had a career year. Why wouldn't they at least hold that rating? I just feel like the way that players improve or not improve, it doesn't make a lot of sense in franchise, and it just really hurts the mode. We're gonna hop over here now, and I feel like free agency and trades, these things are pretty simple for me. I feel like it'd be really cool to have a little bit more of control with free agents. Could we do maybe a non-roster invite during spring training, maybe a minor league contract for players, or just maybe have a cutscene where you actually meet the player and you can kind of negotiate with them, kind of like other games do have, just to add a little bit more a realistic touch to it, a more in-depth feel with free agency. Because right now we have this, and it's pretty simple, it's straight to the point, but I don't know, I feel like we could just get a little bit more where it's just give me a little bit more in-depth things. And then when you look at the trades are pretty simple, but
just allow me to trade more than 3 players. You know, like let me put 4 or 5 players in, because I feel like a lot of trades in baseball end up being, you know, kind of big packages where you're getting 4 or 5 players for one guy, or you're getting like an 8-player trade or a 9-player trade. And right now I can only do 6, and a lot of the times I feel like I'm a little bit off on a trade, and having that extra slot would be really nice. So now let's talk about scouting, because this is a big one, because I want to talk about prospects, and I also want to talk about MLB scouting. So a fog of war mode. So let's talk about the MLB. A fog of war mode would be really cool, where you don't know anything about any players outside of your team. Obviously, you know your team's attributes and potentials and things like that. But say I want to go out and trade for Manny Machado. So if I'm looking at Manny Machado and I want to make a trade for him, and I have this fog of war mode on, I don't know his attributes. I may have like a little range because he is a more popular player. So maybe his contact versus righties, I'll have like a 50 to 85 range. So I know his contact is in there in somewhere in that range. So the more I scout Manny Machado, the better I'll have an understanding of where his contact is. So the longer I scout him, the better and more accurate representation, or the better and more accurate report I'll have on Manny Machado. So I'll have a range at the start, so I'll kind of have an idea of what he's rated, but I won't have the exact like 90 rating or 70 rating. I'll just have a range. So that way it forces you to kind of be smarter with the moves that you make. You won't know the potential of players. You won't know the ratings of players. You just kind of have like a small range to work with unless you scout them, and then you'll get a more accurate report. So that'd be cool. Obviously you could turn that off so that way if you just wanted to know the ratings right away, you could. But having that mode where it kind of forces you to have more of a challenge and you don't know the ratings right away would be something that'd be pretty cool to have. So now speaking of prospects, you know, this is cool and all, you know, you can scout them, you get a report like this, like that's fine. I like that. But it'd be really cool to have something like in 2K where they have like a draft board, which, you know, say I want to remember on draft day that I want Soriano, Hodges, Pena, Blanton. Those are kind of like the main players that I want to target. But then I get to the draft day and I completely forgot their names. Well, having a draft board would be really cool, because then I could like, maybe if it's like circle, I can click circle on a player and it adds them to my short list, my draft board, where then that way on draft day, I can pull up my short list and I can be like, oh, it was this guy that I wanted, let me draft him. It would look something like this, where you can see like I have the 4 players kind of shortlisted. These are my top picks that I want. Obviously, if a team picks them, it'll show like Orioles drafted here, so you can't pick them anymore. But that way you have players that you shortlisted, and that way you don't have to like search through every position and try to remember the name. It's just like a little short list, kind of like a cheat sheet that you have on draft day to remember who you had, and those were the top prospects that you wanted. And then another cool thing would be kind of like a mock draft, where it just kind of gives you like a player comparison that you could have, or like just something where it shows you, you know, this guy, because they predict to be number 1, this guy's going to be number 2, so on and so forth, just to add to that in-depth, you know, that whole feel of what a franchise really should be. So I think that'd be kind of cool to have. Like I mentioned, like a scouting report, you know, kind of have like a section where it has like a player comparison, or like this guy could be a really good power hitter in the future and things like this. Because like right now, this player card is cool, but I feel like they could add more to it. Just basically what I'm saying is there's a lot of cool things in the game mode right now, but you could just add a little bit more so that it'll improve the feel, the in-depth, just the whole way franchise is. Because I feel like we have a good mode, there's a lot of good features in it, we could just add more to it and make it a lot better. So there's that. And I feel like that's kind of like the big points that I wanted to talk about. I do want to still talk about relocation, and then really one other small thing is just give me a little bit more in-depth like statistics and team rankings, because there's just not a lot here. You know, I can see like team rankings here, I can see player stats, but then when I go here, I don't have like, I can't see how many times a player won MVP or a gold glove, or what year they won a gold glove or an MVP or a rookie of the year. There's just no section for like kind of like a log of their accolades. That'd be cool to have in game. I'd also like to see, you know, kind of going back to like how many times I won a World Series or how many games I won throughout my career, things like that. Just kind of make like a history book, and like kind of make it so that like I can go back, and this is more for the stat nerds, but just kind of go back and see like how many times, you know, Christian Yelich won MVP, or because you can only see 3 years for an award. Well, maybe I want to see I'm in the year 2029. I want to remember who won MVP in 2020, but now I can't because I only have a 3-year window, you know, just to kind of have that whole situation where I'm like, man, I really wish I could go back and look at different standings or statistics, or who's now the RBI leader for this team, or anything like that, who's been in the Hall of Fame since we started this franchise. This is really for like kind of the stat nerds, and just kind of to look back at a franchise, especially if you're deep in one where you're like 30 years in the future, and you just kind of want to go back and see how things kind of played out throughout this whole franchise save. So the last thing, this was kind of like a big addition for this year's installment of MLB the Show, which was kind of like rebranding relocation. And I thought this was a really cool feature. You know, you can add your own logo, team details, all that stuff. Like you can edit the uniforms. It's awesome. The one major flaw I have with it is it's kind of hard to get a relocation feel when all you have to select are the current MLB stadiums, spring training fields, which really don't add any atmosphere to the game mode. There's no stands out there in the outfield, so there's like no fans who can, you know, wave banners or towels or whatever it is. So there's no feel there. There's also like your logo's not out there anywhere. Same thing with the classic fields. You know, you have Old Texas, which randomly has like the Texas Rangers logo there. You have the Braves old stadium with the Braves logo in center field. So even if I were to use these fields, I'm still seeing old teams' logos, which takes away from the whole field of me relocating to these fields. So maybe you create a stadium feature where like you don't even have to give it too in depth, you know, maybe like allow me a certain type of background, or like keep it super simple like MVP 05 or NCAA football 14, where, you know, you have like a generic background where it's like the suburbs or the city or the mountains or anything like that. And then you can kind of tweak the walls a little bit, the dimensions, what kind of grass or turf you have. You know, do you have it like Humphrey Field here where like there's just a little bit of dirt on the bases, and then you have like the grass infield? Do you have the normal infield? You know, it doesn't have to be like this crazy in-depth, you know, create like, I want my left corner to have a 40-foot wall, and that's only like a 5-foot section, and then I edit this next section of the wall where it's only like 5 feet tall. I don't need to have that crazy control of it, but at least have some sort of like build a stadium or create a stadium feature where I can actually make it so that like if I relocate a team, I have like my own stadium. So that'd be kind of cool to have something kind of like this with like 2K. Like this, you can see the jumbotron, the table, the buckets, you know, the baskets, the seating. You know, you can kind of just make the stadium feel like it's yours, rather than just I'm reusing Wrigley Field or I'm reusing old Miami or whatever it is. Kind of give me a feel of this is my new relocated or rebranded franchise. Also, you could have like different cities where you have like this whole feel of what is the city's interest on relocating to this area? Are you gonna have like a good welcoming? Are you gonna have like be able to get better revenue because you're going to a more popular city or a less popular city? Things like that, just to kind of add again to that whole feel of franchise, that more in-depth like feel to it. I just feel like that's really what this mode is lacking, is just in-depth feel. Like it's there. I just feel like it's a little cookie cutter right now, and I feel like this game mode that's what it's missing. It's just adding that in-depth feel to make it more enthralling, more fun, more enjoyable. Because like, yes, I love franchise, yes, I love playing the game mode, but I feel like I just lose interest so much because it's just kind of cookie cutter. So that's really about it, guys. And I hope you guys did enjoy this franchise wish list for MLB the Show 21. A lot of the things I feel like would really improve the game mode. Like I'm looking back at my list here, and I feel like it would really help the mode. It would really help with the immersion. And throughout the whole video, I was thinking of the word immersion, and I kept saying the in-depth feel. And I was like, it would just really help you get immersed into a franchise, you know, kind of help you feel like you're really taking part of that like team. Like you own the team, or you're the GM, you're controlling the team, rather it just being like, I made a trade, I sign a player, get through the season, repeat. You know, there's a lot of different aspects that you could control, and a lot of new features that would make it a lot better. So I hope you guys do enjoy it. If you do, consider hitting that like button down below. Of course, get in the comment section, let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you would want to change, or what you feel like would help out the game mode. I'll definitely get in the comment section, interact with you guys there. I want to see what you guys are thinking, what I missed out on. And if you're new to the channel, just consider hitting that subscribe button. That's really about it, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.